Hi, welcome back to the English Scholar online camp. In the previous video, we talked about the fundamental categories, forms, and types of verbs. In this video, we'll talk about the three types of non-finite verbs, namely auxiliary verbs, infinitives, and participles. But before we continue, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more notifications whenever we upload new videos. Now let's begin the discussion by tackling first auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are also known as helping verbs. Remember in the previous video when we discussed about non-finite verbs. Non-finite verbs are those types of verb that cannot stand alone to make a complete thought of predicate. For example, I will or I must. What do we mean by these sentences? Sounds lacking, right? These sentences will only give a complete thought if they are used to answer a question or to agree on something someone has already said. For example, will you take the course? Your answer would be, I will. And if someone suggests, you must buy a new bag, your answer would be, yes, I must. But if you say these sentences for no reason, it will give no complete thought. They need main verbs. Say like for example, I must go now, or I will eat. Go and eat here are our main verbs. Now, these sentences give a complete thought of predicate. Why? Because of the main verbs. By the way, here is the full list of auxiliary verbs. The primary auxiliary verbs are be, do, and have, and they are the most commonly occurring auxiliaries in English. Each can also be used as a main verb in a clause. All verbs have present participle and past participle forms, except modal auxiliary verbs. And here is the list of modal auxiliary verbs. We have can, could, will, would, shall, should, must, may, and might. The remaining verbs, like ought to, used to, need, and dare, are known as semi-modal verbs, and they do not share all the characteristics of the modal auxiliary verbs above, and only function as auxiliary verbs in certain ways. If we use these verbs in a sentence without the main verbs, it will not give a complete thought of predicate as well. Next, infinitives. Infinitives are the most basic construction of a verb. When we talk of a verb as a general concept, we usually use the infinitive form, which is the unchanged base form of the verb plus the particle to. Let's have few base form of verbs, and we'll use them for our examples. We have eat, drink, run, walk, and see. To make infinitive verbs, we put the particle to before these base verbs. So they will turn into to eat, to drink, to walk, to run, to see. And if we are going to use them in a sentence, we are going to say, I am going to eat, or I am going to drink. I will have to walk. You need to run. You have to see the consequences. If you notice in these sentences, apart from the infinitives, there are also other forms of verbs. If we remove these ones, the predicate will not be complete. So that's what makes infinitives a non-finite verb. Last one, participles. Participles are forms of verbs that either function with auxiliary verbs to create the continuous and perfect verb tenses or as adjectives to modify nouns. All verbs have present participle and past participle forms, except modal auxiliary verbs. Now let's try to form present participle and past participle of verbs. Let's have some example, but first let us make a 3-column table. The first column should be for the base form, the second is for the present participle, and the third column should be for the past participle. We use the base form of verb to create a simple present tense. For example, I read a book. The word read here is the base form of the verb, and it is always the original word. And C, we are using it to make up simple present tense. We use the present participle to create a continuous or perfect form of tense. The present participle of the verb is always the base form plus ing, though some verbs may change in form, but very minimal. For example, I am reading a book. We have the base form of the verb read, and we added ing to form a present participle. And in order to make a continuous tense, we put an auxiliary verb am. Always remember, when we use present participle form of verb to make a continuous tense or perfect tense, we should always partner it with auxiliary verbs. And the choice of auxiliary verbs will vary depending on the thought intended. Now, we use past participle to form some other types of tenses. The past participle is the base form of the verb plus d or ed for the regular verbs. But for the irregular verbs, it really depends and we have no pattern for that. To continue, if we make read into past participle, it will be read. The spelling is the same, but the pronunciation is different. Please take note of that as well. And if we use it to form a certain tense, for example, present perfect tense, then it will look like this: I have read a book. The same with present participle. When we make a perfect tense using past participle, we also should put an auxiliary verb. In this sentence, we use the auxiliary verb have. To know more about tenses, please refer to the link below for a separate video discussion. If you were not able to catch up, please feel free to replay the video and do not stop until you fully understand this video's topic. Let's stop there for now. Thank you for watching and see you next video.